It's raining outside. Let's dubstep. Alright, first we need a drop. When I'm trying to master a style, in this case dubstep, I won't jump right into sound design. Usually what I'll do is just pick a few sounds from sample packs that I like and that have the right tone and the right energy, and just try to figure out how to arrange, how to mix, and how to put together these drops or song elements. In this case, I've started with a few individual growls and synth hits that I've arranged in a drum rack in Ableton Live. And what I'm looking for when picking the sounds is different textures and different frequencies, so that way when I'm putting together these calls and responses within the drop, it always stays interesting sonically speaking. So let's go through the sounds. The first one is always the most important, and so you want something that has a lot of energy, a lot of bass. And I follow up this first sound with sounds that have different textures and different frequencies. So it's really nice to have just this big growl and then some rhythmic sounds like that. And finally, the fifth one, I just duplicated 4 times, going up 1 semitone to have this kind of up the ladder transition at the end of my loop. All right, we got sounds. It's time to play. Okay, so here we have the light pad blocks, and on the bottom 8 pads here I have set up all of my growls and synths. And pay attention to the looping sounds. Actually, they're not looping. I have to press and hold for those to play, so it makes it much more easier to have like a super rhythmic drop in that sense, because the sounds won't overlap when you press them super fast like so. Once I have all of this set up, what I'm going to do is just play around with the different pads like so without the drum beat, because dubstep can become very ear tiring, and with that fatigue you'll lose a sense of perspective on what you're trying to achieve. So once I found this nice little sequence, I'll start my drum beat and start jamming to the drum beat and see if it still sticks and holds and sounds nice and exciting. And once I have that and I'm still happy with what I'm hearing, then I'll press record and go back to the MIDI data afterwards to really perfect everything within my drop. Here we are in Ableton Live, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did the beat that you hear in the intro and that you'll hear in its entirety at the end of the video. There are 3 main sections to my little song. I have this build up right here, then I have my main drop, and then I have this alternate drop with more of a trap feel. So the whole beat started with this sound. If we listen to it without all of my plug-in chain, so very, very aggressive, and I liked the intensity in it, but I really felt like it was way too harsh. So first thing I did was to add some sidechain compression, actually very intense sidechain compression. So the first portion, which is the harshest, is kind of cut off with the sidechain, and then I add some EQ here, cutting all of the lows below 194 Hertz. That way I'll have all of the room for my kick. And then I'm also reducing much of those very harsh high mids. And finally I added a big hall reverb in here just to add more size to this sound, because it's the only sound actually that's playing in the build-up with the vocal. So with everything, All right, moving on, we have the kick, and I've layered that kick with these build-up drums from Cymatics. I really liked those affected cymbals in there, and by cutting actually most of the frequencies that are in the kick, I've kept my kick, and I have the rest from the build-up drums. Next we have this uplifter here, and this is the trick I usually use. I'll cut most of the low frequencies and add a lot of air to it. And if we listen to the uplifter without, you see that those very, very low frequencies actually don't do much for the effect we're trying to achieve, which is rising intensity. And again, I'm adding the same setting on the LFO tool, just so that everything bounces at the same time. And finally, we have this 808, which does one note with sidechain compression, and I have finally the vocal, the full vocal.
Rolling with my click and we come and we stunt like.
And pay attention, when you add these rap type vocals, you still want to detune so that the main note kind of fits with your scale in the build-up and the drop. You want to have this consistent, root note or scale within all of the sounds you're using. So if we were just to play, let's play this first little portion here with no transposition.
Rolling with my click and we come and we stunt like.
I don't know, first of all, it sounds kind of chipmunky, and second of all, sounds much in tune with the bass that way. All right, so let's move on to the main drop. Here we have a very, very simple drum pattern, which consists of a kick, a snare, and a crash. And there's actually nothing on my kick and snare. This is rare, but when you really build all of your beat around a perfect quote-unquote kick and snare, you will usually not have to do much to those sounds. The only thing I did is add again some sidechain compression to the crash. That way it meshes much better with the kick and snare and actually highlights them, creates some intensity. If I were to play the drum beat without, you'll see that it's very static. And so with some harsh sounds such as crashes, sidechain compression is a great way to actually tame some of those frequencies. All right, then we have a version B, or a second version of our vocal loop.
Click, click.
In which I'm just highlighting some of the sounds that might become, the title of the song or the main concept around the song. And so I just have the full phrase at the very end of the loop.
Click, click. Click, click, come and stunt like.
So this brings back the one very nicely with the little rhyme here. And let's move to the pièce de résistance, as we say in French, the most important part of our drop, which are the basses. As we saw previously, I've added everything in a drum rack, and here we can take a look at the actual MIDI that I kept for my drop. So as you can see, certain MIDI notes I've added afterwards because I was not able to play that fast on the light pad. So it's always nice to have a first go, record something that sounds nice, and then you can come here and add some intricacies, certain things that will make it even more interesting and less, repetitive. So synth, drums, and vocals sound like this.
Click, click. Click, click, come and stunt like. Click, click. Click,
And one last thing about the drop synths, I've again added the same settings with the LFO tool. I've added this little very short reverb, which just gives it more body, if you will. That's without. I felt like it gave it more of an ambiance around it, gave it more of a live feel, which I liked. And finally, I came in here with an EQ, removed most of the frequencies that I want to keep for the kick and the sub bass, and then removed a lot of mids, which I felt were, keeping the mix a bit too boxy. So you want to have usually, especially in dubstep and EDM, this smiley face quote-unquote EQ here, and I'm adding a lot of air right here. So that's about it for the drop synths. Next we have this 808 type sub bass. So this is a sample that comes from one of the sample packs that I have on my website, delicatebeats.com. It's called Sweet, and I really like those 808s because they are mostly from analog gear, and so they have this very thick sound that sits in the mix so easily. As you see, there's no actual mixing done here. All I'll have is my same old LFO tool. I tried some saturation, but it didn't give quite the effect I was looking for. So that's really it. And then it's a WAV file that I just tune to my liking. And at the end of the loops, I've done a little bit of automation. If we look at the transposition modulation, you'll see that I drop or rise an octave to create more of an interesting bass loop. And at the end, I try to mimic whatever is going on here in the drop synths. And finally, at the very beginning of the loop, I have this white noise downlifter type sound. And again, it's just, the sidechain compression again to have it bouncing with the rest of the drop. And I have this little also vocal snippet here. It's just just this little scream to add more intensity at the very beginning of each of the loops. So all in all, my drop sounds like this. And finally, let's look at what I've done here in the alternate drop. Basically, I removed my dubstep drums. I've filtered my drop synths with the auto filter. Sounds like this. Makes much more room for the vocal.
Click, click.
And finally, here at the bottom, I have these trap drums. And all together, it sounds like this.
Click, click. Click, click. Coming spotlight. Click, click. Click, click. Coming spotlight. Click, click.
And I also have this hi-hat loop that I probably haven't done anything to. Well, actually, no. Again, sidechain compression, just to have it moving in and out of the beat a bit more. And on this note, let's listen to the final product.
With my click and we coming stop like. With my click, click, coming stop like. With my click and we coming stop like. With my click and we click, click. Click, click, coming stop like. Click, click. Click, click. like click, click. Click, click, come and we start like click, click. Click, click, come and we start like click, click. Click, click, come and we start like